Good morning, everybody. How are we today? You good? Jonathan, can you hear me all okay? Is everybody
Yeah.
okay?
Oh, sorry, that was
Yeah,
under.
Sorry.
Yeah,
Yeah.
no, we're good, thank you.
good
Fine.
stuff. Good stuff. Apologies for the delay, everybody. Was having a slight technical issue with Zoom. I think you had to uninstall, reinstall, and reboot the old beast and go again, right?
I think as is often the case, I've had an update on my computer and immediately everything stops working, which is technology. I do apologize.
Absolutely fine. It's always a way. We wouldn't have it any other way. Um, Thank you, everybody, for joining us today. We're going to kick things off because I know we're 3 minutes late. Hopefully, everybody can see my screen. They can all hear us all clearly as well. Welcome to Club Live. I hope you're having a great week. Thank you for those that are saying hello and good morning in the chat and letting us know it's all loud and clear, which is amazing. If you guys and girls have got any questions throughout the day, please do let us know in the chat function that you're using at the moment. Any questions are welcome. So if there's anything that's on the tip of your tongues, please do fire away. Jonathan and John are with us today. If you wouldn't mind, when you exit today's session, you will be asked to participate in a feedback form. It's really important that we find out how you found today's session. It's where you can request your CPD certificates, and also there's ways that you can interact and get involved with Jonathan and John from Commentus and Bear Rock as well. So let's kick things off. Let's get straight into today's session. Just a quick introduction to the Financial Planning Club. Amanda Ford has run a couple of very successful financial planning businesses, national advice businesses, both employed and self-employed models, operations, events, and everything in between. So coming to the club with a ton of experience. Myself and Lewis, we've run a recruitment business now for over 10 years, solely within financial planning. And I was just talking to Jonathan actually because he said, what was the backbone and how did the club come to life? And it was really firms, having some operational, efficiencies or, just problems within the business. Their quickest solution was to hire, right? But that's not always the case. We need to get to the bottom of as to what's going on in the business. We help firms with business planning, roadmaps, workshops, and everything in between as well. Jade is with us in the comments and in the chat function as well. She's the backbone and the glue to everything we do. I've shared my QR code there as well. Connect with me on LinkedIn because I will be creating some content off the back of today's webinar, along with other webinars that we host on a weekly basis. But look, we couldn't do what we do without the incredible support and backing of every single one of our collaborators now. Incredible firms that are really driving and innovating the industry that we all work in. It's great content delivered by some really, really cool and collaborative firms that we work with. So just a big thank you and a big shout out to everybody that is now collaborating with the club. As you all know, we like to build a community for absolutely everybody within the wonderful financial planning profession. People need to talk and people need support. So we've got individual WhatsApp communities depending on the role that you play within your business. If you're a business owner, a financial advisor, an ops manager, a power planner, whatever role you play, we do have individual WhatsApp communities for you. Our weekly club lives bring you insights from industry experts, and our podcast is where you can hear stories from those who are running a financial planning business. We're taking this live to a couple of events this year as well. We're at the Verve podcast on tour, and we're also off to the PFS with our podcast booth. So we cram in a ton of episodes live on the day. I think we've done about 20 last time at the Verve. We'll aim for another 20 live episodes in September, and at the PFS it's a 2-day event, so we're probably going to double that, so we'll be busy for those days for sure. So if you're attending any of those events and you'd like to be on our podcast, come along. They're only short 10-15 minute episodes, so it'd be good to hear your story for sure. Just quickly, what we've got coming up. If you're curious about the club and what we do and how we do it, then come along for our webinar titled Curious About the Club. Very creative, that one. Friday, the 21st of August, I believe we kick off at 10 a.m. And we just talk you through what we're doing, right? How we support business owners, what the membership looks like. and the challenges that we help solve. Following that, after the half-term summer holidays, Wednesday the 16th of September, we are with Corbell. And we're really looking at supporting employed advisors that want to take that leap to self-employed owner. So things you need to look out for, things you should be doing, can't be doing, and everything in between. So if you're an employed advisor and you're looking to take that leap, we've got a very good webinar on Wednesday, the 16th of September. And then we're with ISEO, everything you wanted to know about the FCA's review of ongoing advice, but are afraid to ask. So exactly how you registered for today's webinar, you can register for any of our up-and-coming sessions as well. If you register but you cannot attend, we do send out recordings. So please do come along to as many as you can. So, Club Live today, consumer duty aligned client satisfaction surveys. Joining me is John Nettin, COO and founder of Bearrock, and Jonathan Barrett, CEO and founder of Commentis. John brings over 30 years experience in compliance, PI and regulatory risk, while Jonathan has built Commentis to help advice firms evidence good client outcomes and meet consumer duty requirements through technology. It's great to have you both with us at long last, because we've rearranged this webinar 3 times, and I thought it was going to get cancelled at 2 minutes past 10 until John's Zoom decided to play ball, which is amazing. Before we get started, here's a quick snapshot of who's joining us today. So as always, a good mix of advisors, power planners and compliance professionals in the room, a couple of business owners as well. What's interesting is that there's no single approach to evidencing good client outcomes. Some firms are using client satisfaction surveys, others relying on suitability reports or compliant data. Why quite a few still don't have a formal process in place. Do you find that, guys, across the board? Are people finding themselves in a situation where they don't have a defined process in place for evidencing good client outcomes?
Yeah, definitely. I am finding it's increasing, which is good. And the client satisfaction surveys were really, really popular when TCF first came into existence, all those years ago. And unfortunately, I think when the regulator removed focus from it, people dropped off doing them and lost the good habit that had been built through that. But yeah, post Consumer Duty, we've started to see the take-up of client satisfaction surveys increase. But there's now a few myths, which hopefully we'll dispel as we go through the day, that sort of prevent people from using it.
Yeah.
But yeah, we're starting to see it come out, which is positive, I have to say. We'll come back to that as well. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
About you, Jonathan?
Just to add to that, I think what we're certainly seeing is some of the satisfaction surveys that are being put out there are more around sort of your Trustpilot-y type thing. So they haven't got a compliance lens. It's let's get some good, which has a place, obviously. People look at reviews for absolutely everything, have a place, but perhaps don't support them through demonstrating good outcomes and the compliance piece. So again, that's obviously one of the areas we're going to cover today.
Yeah, I think it's funny. It's a funny outlook, right? Because I could imagine 99% of firms will have a very clear, defined process in place for when a complaint comes in, right? But not at when there's a problem with the business, not a process in place to identify those good client outcomes as well. You know, it's time to flip the script on its head, right? And start putting a process in place to how we can evidence really good client outcomes. And that is the purpose of today's session, which is going to be really, really good. I will stop sharing my screen. I believe we might get a few next slide, please, because John is going to be managing the slide deck. Jonathan is going to be presenting, as well as both of them presenting. So just bear with us. It might feel a little bit like the COVID days, but we will get through it.
There we go. Hopefully you should be able to see my slides now.
Absolutely.
Oh, I see. So, having had technology traumas at the beginning, I'm a little bit more nervous.
You've put me on edge, that's for sure.
Well, it's good for you. It's good for your emotional state to have a little bit of pressure first thing on a Friday morning.
Absolutely.
He says, right, okay. So yeah, thank you very much for that intro, and we'll dive straight into the content if we may. Quite a lot to go through. I'm just going to skip past the first couple of slides. We've already done the intro. I have to point out, and just for my own amusement and possibly Jonathan's, the pictures. I much preferred the pictures you put up of us a second
yeah,
ago.
me too. I mean, I was about 5 years younger at that point.
Yeah, I was going to say there was significantly less grey on the
Yeah.
previous picture, so we use that one more, please.
Yeah. I'll send it to you afterwards.
Yeah. Well, okay. So, what's the learning objectives for today? And I will, just before we go into this, just frame the fact that actually we're going to pick most of these learning objectives up at the back end of the presentation. So we're going to go through some background and some knowledge that helps inform the learning objectives. So we're not going to dive straight into them, but by the end of the session, we hopefully will have positioned such that you have a good understanding of how using well-aligned surveys can assist you demonstrating you've got good outcomes across the consumer duty outcomes, the four regulatory outcomes. We'll also have given you some hints and tips on how you might implement that and why, and very much linking to that, how that can benefit you from a client understanding and evidencing point of view, and sort of possibly a little bit of almost negative framing, if I'm honest, because we're also going to look at how having surveys can reduce risk of complaints, or more to the point, put you in a stronger position should you get a complaint. Yeah, which I know is a slightly negative way of looking at a satisfaction survey, and there's all the positives alongside it. But I think sometimes having an understanding of how it can actually be used to help defend you in future is also equally important. Okay. Before we dive into the content, quick survey. We just have a yes/no in text, please, as to whether you use satisfaction surveys or not. Give you a second to do that. He says.
Oh, they're coming in now.
Yeah, starting to come in. Okay.
And can some of these surveys, guys, just be built internally? Just put together yourself, just what you'd like to see on a survey kind of thing, or is there a bit of an off-the-shelf product that people are buying into? Like, for example, is it a Microsoft Forms that people are putting together, historically, just to get a bit of survey coming in?
We have seen it, and I'll dive in before Jonathan quickly. My concern always, it's easier for me as a sort of agnostic third party to sort of respond to the concern with self-development. It's a bit like people writing their own attitude to risk questionnaire. Yeah, you need it stress tested. You need the academic understanding that sits behind it for me to actually make sure that what you're capturing is the right information. It's very easy to come up with a list of questions to ask, but it's not necessarily always easy to measure whether you're getting the right response on those questions. So it needs really a specialist team to understand how the questions map to the outcomes and to the right information, which is very difficult to do yourself. Preference is that home or business developed tools aren't necessarily the right answer. As an impartial objector, it's easy for me to say that. Jonathan, I'm sure you would agree as a provider of one.
I mean, to be honest, my take is, look, a survey is a survey. It's really easy. Yes, you can go and use SurveyMonkey. You can do Microsoft Forms. You can probably go and ask AI to do one for you. Let's be honest. You see, that's not the hard bit. So where you need to have a survey that actually works for you is one, say, number one is the data that you get out of it. How do you use the data? How do you present that data? That keeps the FCA happy and then helps you. How do you have a survey that has a proactive approach? So if an area of concern is identified, that is flagged to you. How do you align it against the four pillars? Us as a business, our core area of our business is vulnerability assessments. So how do you overlay that survey outcomes with vulnerability data? Because that is a key. I'm jumping ahead of one of my slides, but that's one of the real key drivers. So yes, off the shelf SurveyMonkey, absolutely give it a bash. But it will do the survey, but it won't give you the insights and everything else that you actually need to really help your business.
And just tell me if you're going to be covering this in the session, right? But is there a golden time to fire this survey out to people? At what point of the process is now? This is a good. Are you covering this, John?
I will cover that one.
Hold fire on that one.
Hold fire on that.
Yeah.
Let's crack on, and then we can
absolutely. And likewise, for anyone attending, if you've got any questions, just fire away as well, because I'll have a ton, but I'd rather have your questions answered along the way.
I'll just before we move on, it's really positive that actually the majority of people who've responded to the yes/no question of using surveys is that they are being used by this audience, which is great. And I have to say it's a stronger yes in this audience than I've seen before, which is really positive. So yeah,
perhaps the no's are just not coming forward because we only had.
Maybe the no's aren't admitting it. Yeah. But
fair point. Admitting it.
Fair point. Right, I'll hand over to you, Jonathan, so you can dive into.
Excellent. Yeah, this will be sort of quite short and sweet. One or two of you on the call may have heard of Consumer Duty, and a few little changes and requirements that it's put. Yeah, John, if you just bring up all the bullet points, I think that would be absolutely fine. Obviously, we have seen a major shift. An absolutely major shift. It's been in place, a couple of years now, and it's now really bedding down. We talk to the regulator quite a lot around the work that we do, say predominantly around vulnerability. And this shift is now starting to actually really happen in terms of what they're monitoring and what they're expecting. They've sort of said, okay, you've had a couple of years of grace. You now need to deliver and demonstrate what we want to see. And I say, where we work with a number of compliance firms, we hear exactly the same message. And that key shift is moving from that principle-based approach, what goes into the mix, to actually, this is all about outcomes. What is your client, your customer, if you want to call them, what is the outcome that they have received? Is it a good outcome? Is it a bad outcome? And that's a $1 million question as well, because what may be deemed as a good outcome for an advisor may not be a good outcome for a client, and vice versa, remember. So it's really, really sort of shifting to what is that outcome, and then how do you measure, how do you demonstrate? And I think the other thing that we've seen, certainly with the regulator and conversations, is data. It is all about data. Now they've sort of banded around talking about being a data-led regulator. It is absolutely the case. Absolutely. So having that data is so vitally important. And obviously something like a survey, it is both qual and quant data, so it can really, really, help and have reporting off the back of it. But yeah, it is all about outcomes now and demonstrating those good outcomes. And that is across all the pillars of Consumer Duty. You need to be able to deliver it across all. So that obviously leads to, okay, how do you demonstrate that? How do you prove to the regulator, your compliance firm, and yourselves internally that you are delivering good outcomes? Obviously, there's different ways of doing it. And one of those is that survey. And like we talked about in the introduction, surveys are great. They've been around for years. A lot of people use them, but they use them for very different reasons. And I think what we've seen is lesser used from a regulatory point and more from a general feedback, or say, the sort of the trust pilot-y type approach. Again, really important. You then got a dilemma and say, well, what survey do we do? Do we do a trust survey? I know Fintel Group have got one, which again, the same as about reviews and everything else. But it is so important these days to be able to do it through that regulatory lens. The other area, obviously very close to our heart, given the core business that we do, is that vulnerability status and that vulnerability data. And I'll cover that in my next slide. Being able to cross-reference those two is so important. And again, they must keep, you've got to keep those clear, auditable records, which is something I know is very, very close to John's heart and Bear Rock heart, because every PI firm and compliance firm tells me if it's not written down and documented, it didn't happen. So that's really, really important. And then the latest thing that we've had in terms of that context is CP 2623 from the regulator, which again is really focused on proportionality, but also on outcomes, demonstrating those good outcomes. It reinforces that same message. Now, what's interesting is it also talks about showing data up and down distribution chain. So I think we need to start to think about how does outcome surveys work in that space. And you may or may not be aware, but a couple of weeks or months ago now, there was a joint statement from the FCA and the ICO around sharing data, again around vulnerability data as well. So bottom line is you need to have data and you need to actually see what your clients are thinking. And the survey is just one part of that, measuring the outcome. There's investment performance, there's everything else, but it's a really core part. So vulnerability. If you just bring up all the bullet points again, I can't remember what I put in them, to be fair. Again, another key premise of the regulator. They started talking about vulnerability back in 2015, it was a while ago. Then in Feb 2021, we had the guidance on the fair treatment of vulnerable customers. It has been incredibly embedded in consumer duty across all 4 pillars. And it's almost like an extra cross-cutting rule. So it is really, really important. And so that key premise from the regulator is they want firms to be able to demonstrate a client who is vulnerable or in vulnerable circumstances had the same output and outcome as a client who was non-vulnerable. So how do you demonstrate that? And obviously surveys where you have vulnerability data in the mix is a really, really strong way of actually doing that. The other thing about vulnerability, it needs to come across the whole advice journey. So everything from, say, your onboarding, advice, post-advice, annual review, ongoing review, you need to keep account of that. So really, really important. So again, that leads to the last point, which is about overlaying that vulnerability data against satisfaction outcomes. That is the gold dust, the absolute gold dust to be able to actually do that. So again, we'll show you a demo and sort of a use case that we've built. I'm not saying it's the only way or the best way, but it's what we've got of how that actually works. So yeah, key takeaway. Consumer duty, as we pretty much all know, let's be honest, it's really been a paradigm shift in terms of how firms expect to not operate, but demonstrate how they operate and how you report. So it's really, really important to get beyond following a process, look at the whole thing and the outcome. Surveys, obviously a great way to do that. And you get the data, and you can demonstrate everything to them. And it's actually, and John will talk about this, I know, it's actually a really good way, we said another closing point there, of building that stronger relationship with a client. Because if there's something you do identify that they've not been happy, not happy with, or niggling at them, and they haven't raised it for the advice process, this is a great way of actually doing so. There you go. And a quick snapshot on sort of some regulatory context there for you.
Brilliant. Thanks, mate.
Back to you now, John.
Yeah, in fact, I'll dive straight into the point you mentioned there. What are the benefits of doing a survey? And I appreciate that I'm looking at this very much from a risk and an indemnity insurance lens. So and unapologetically so, because I think the whole purpose of satisfaction surveys is that it gives you, as you just alluded to there, that regular feedback, and that makes clients feel really valued. And a valued client is more likely to engage with you. They're more likely to ask you questions before things become a problem. I think it's amazing how many times on complaints the issue started to form years before a client actually complained, and that engagement with a client up front can address things much more promptly. So you can have that early detection trigger through asking the questions through a survey. And early detection, not unsurprisingly, means that you can address it before markets deteriorate and before redress becomes significant. So early detection is hugely powerful from a PI point of view. There are many benefits of satisfaction surveys, though. You've got obviously that loyalty. A loyal client that feels engaged, feels listened to, is more likely to be retained by the firm, less likely to leave, and being honest, less likely to make spurious and vexatious complaints in the future. So building loyalty is hugely powerful from a complaint prevention. And I've already mentioned the early detection, but it's so important that effectively it's worth mentioning twice. And that early detection, it might just be that they didn't understand something, and you get the opportunity to address it early on before that trust is eroded, and as I say again, minimising that financial impact. Hugely powerful from a complaint defence. We have had many instances over the years, and in my previous life when I was compliance in network world, where we've had a client satisfaction survey. We then get a claims company complaint saying you didn't do this, you didn't give this, you didn't explain that, and we can go, that's interesting, because at the time we have this survey that said you did have that information, you said you understood it, and you were happy with what had happened. So immediately erodes vexatious claims company type complaints where you've got a positive survey on file. So hugely powerful from that point of view. And last but not least, it helps in itself reduce future complaints. A client that has answered a survey positively is going to remember that they answered that positively, and they're going to be anchored to that initial position. So they're psychologically less likely to put in a complaint in the future, because they will remember back to that positive satisfaction survey response that they've already put in, and they become anchored to that view. So emotionally, it's a lot harder for them to sort of change tack on that. I'm going to touch on behavioural science in a second, but I think it's really important that the use of surveys linked heavily to how you can engage with a client and how you can make sure clients are engaged with from a behavioural point of view, and they're hugely powerful. So which is why we'll touch on that in a second. But just before I do, it's not just good practice. And it's not just about being able to say, yes, customers were happy. It also gives you that body of evidence that Jonathan talked about, and having that, I'm not that interested in, yes, we had lots and lots of happy clients. Happy clients potentially just know that they shouldn't be happy. And that's always the danger of purely just focusing on the satisfaction side of things. But if you've got evidence of that they had information, that they understood things, then more that body of information supports that the process was completed correctly, not just that you've got happy clients. Okay. Just one point before I move on. We're very positive at Bearock about surveys. We see all the benefits of it. That early detection, as I say, is one of the key reasons we like it. But I do acknowledge not all PI insurers do. So don't take me saying that we're happy as carte blanche that all PI insurers are. You need to check with your PI insurer and make sure that they're comfortable with you using a survey and how you are. I wouldn't want you invalidating your insurance by not getting sign off from them. And we love it, but we are different from most, in all fairness. Okay, so let's dive into a little bit on behavioural science. I love doing behavioural science information, but I openly acknowledge before I go into this every single time, I am not a behavioural science expert. I'm an enthusiastic amateur that has access to a very, very good behavioural science expert that works with us at Bearock. So Babs feeds, I basically say, why is this the case? And she explains the science behind it. So please accept my apologies if I butcher the concepts a little as I go through it. But this is my enthusiastic amateur understanding of some of the things that link with surveys. And the main thing to talk about with behavioural science and consumer surveys, customer surveys, is that it's about actually getting information, and this leads to the question before about when you should do surveys. You should do them relatively quickly at the point of transaction. And the reason for that is because clients forget. Yeah, there is a behavioral science concept of memory fade, and that links through, and why that memory fade is so important is down to potential cognitive overload, and we'll look at that. And you've also, through all of that, unfortunately got the psychological concept of false memory effects, where people forget things. So let's just look at those three very, very quickly, because this is why it's so important to get feedback not long, if not at the point of the transaction. And the first reason is that memory fade. Yeah, and it's one of the most proven psychological concepts in behavioral science. And the initial sort of concept that's most famous here is the Ebbinghaus forgetting curve, which has proved that any individual starts off remembering everything at the point of time, or a significant amount at the point of time. But as time moves on, more and more gets lost, and especially if you're getting grey like I am, that memory recall dissipates over time. This, by the way, is also why it's so important to have regular review meetings with clients to remind them and make sure that they don't forget why they did something in the first place. But from an information point of view, we give masses and masses of information to clients. Yeah. And this is where it links through to cognitive overload. The more information you give, the faster that erosion of memory happens. So that cognitive overload, there's other reasons as well. I mean, if you're tired or you're stressed, you're more likely to forget things. But I think the main one for us to look at here is that cognitive overload. If we've supplied lots and lots of technical information to a client that's not used to dealing with financial information, they are more likely to forget it much quicker. And that cognitive overload is a really dangerous thing for us, because we need them to understand. I mean, again, it's one of the main drivers of Consumer Duty. But from a future complaint point of view, somebody that's not understood something, or somebody that's not retained the information, is much more likely to make a complaint in the future. And really scarily, the science shows us that most people can only, on average, retain 4 or 5 pieces of information at any one time. So if we've gone through, a whole portfolio recommendation, multiple products, and quite a complex advice process, the probability of them retaining it all is really difficult. So this is why finding out about understanding and did they retain information and what did they really early on with a survey is really critical before they forget it, quite frankly. I do just like mentioning the false memory effects. I think at this point, it's very easy for a client to rebuild their memories when they're forgetting things, and as they've had that memory fade, it's more likely that they will fill in gaps in that memory themselves. And the phenomenon, the Mandela effect, is really famous from a group point of view, but it's the same concept with an individual. And I love the Mandela effect. I mean, I don't know, one of the most famous, obviously, is the Monopoly Man one, where everybody pictures the Monopoly Man as having a monocle in his eye. And apparently he never did, not in a single official illustration. But that filling in of information, the brain does it naturally. People aren't being vexatious about it. It's a natural way that people edit and process. So people retain bits and snippets of information, and then when they recall it later, their brain fills in the gaps and it becomes real to that person. So again, when you've got a complaint in 10 years' time, this is often the reason that people have filled in the gaps and looked at things through their own lens rather than the reality. So keeping good notes and finding out and reiterating why they've done it regularly is so important. But also that survey point, ask them about it when it's recent and they're more likely to remember it. Keep it short so you don't have that cognitive overload on the satisfaction survey as well. You don't want a 200 question survey, obviously exaggerated, and make sure you frame the questions carefully. This is why I go back to the point about developing your own. It's very easy to write something you understand, but not everybody will understand questions in the way that you do. So again, simple and punchy questions is really important. Yeah, I think I'm going to whiz through this very quickly and hand it back to Jonathan now, so he's got enough time to do the case study and demo. But there's clearly a lot of benefit, not just from aren't we doing brilliantly and self-gratification of happy clients, but also from a protection and client understanding point of view. So we strongly endorse it. Over to you, Jonathan.
Thank you. You want to click through to the next slide? I can give some context. Yeah, bring the points up. So this is a really interesting one, and I always like to give a little bit of context. So those who know us, or those who don't, we do vulnerability assessments. That was our core model, a core piece of our business. Still do it. Support thousands of advisors and well over 1,000 firms. What was interesting though is with the way the regulation was going, some of our existing clients were coming to us and saying, this is great at the beginning of the journey, because we are essentially a survey platform. It's great at the beginning of the journey, but what we want to do is we want to be able to really understand the outcomes. And a lot we said, we've been using SurveyMonkey or HubSpot or whatever, but it's labor, it's labor intensive. It doesn't give us the data. It's manual and all this sort of stuff. So it didn't really work for them. And again, that was across a couple of networks. One John knows very well, but also some of our mid-sized firms and some of even our smaller firms were sort of looking for a solution, and we engage with all our clients ongoing. So it was really around those conversations. But you know what? We could build a survey platform. We have the distribution mechanism, we have the software, we have the skill sets, and it was really out of that we then started to sort of look at what we could do. So we had one particular case study, say large network, number of ARs. We're currently doing something, say, very, very manual process, both in terms of the issue and delivery of the assessments, but also reviewing the results. And that seemed to be the biggest pain point for a lot of firms, is that you were having to look at each individual assessment as they came back, and it was a very reactive sort of process. So the phrase I use quite often is what we try and do and we help firms do is proactive compliance. So, get ahead of the game. So, have things flagged to you. Your time is precious. Have things only flagged to you where there's something you've got to do with it. So that was really, really, really important. And again, it was having standalone data where we can't reference that against our vulnerability data, which was obviously why they came to us, because that was a really, really key driver. So at the time, we thought, that's easy. We can build this. It was a lot more work than we thought. Took us a lot longer than what we thought. We had this thing called a hackathon, which I love, where we basically locked our devs and our leadership team in a room and said, right, go build a product. We used AI a lot to start to build the product. What I've realized probably is AI is great. It gets you 80% of the way really quickly. But then the last 20% where you need the devs and the experience, that's a very long tail. So yeah, a really interesting experience for us. But then off the back of that, we came out of a product which initially we had as off the back of the vulnerability surveys. The feedback we're now getting is, well, actually this works better than anything else in the market. So can we have it as a standalone? It works a lot better, our version this is, with the vulnerability data, because you can overlay. But again, I just want to show you in a demo some of the functionality that you should perhaps look for and give some thoughts to how it could actually work for you. So again, if we bring up the bullet points. So firstly, streamlined. It's got to be easy. There's so many tech platforms you're using. We can integrate with a number of different platforms. We haven't integrated the survey yet, but I'm sure we will do. To John's point earlier, keep it short. Best case scenario, and ideal scenario, is 7 to 9 questions and no more. And interestingly, have 7 different options for each question. 5 or 7 options for each question is the best. Don't have a sliding scale for these sort of things and various other bits. There was also a demand coming to us, a request to say that we need to report against each consumer duty pillar. So how are our clients feeling in terms of their outcomes against understanding, against fair value, against suitability? So it was really, really important to break those down. So the other area is proactive area. It's great having, well, you've done a survey and here's your big table of results and everything else. If there is an issue that is identified by a survey, you want to be on it immediately. Absolutely be able to jump on it. So we came up with this whole idea of a flag survey. So if something rings an alarm bell, both good and bad, I should say. So if you get a really, really good response, then you go, well, this is potential testimonial, material. But also then there's risk ones, there's risk factors as well. So you can address it, which feeds back all into John's point. So it would also be rude not to use AI at some point in the process. So one thing that we've got an AI engine and we use it in other parts of the business, but to now do a sentiment analysis. What we very quickly realized is the sentiment analysis report that we produce is literally lifted and dropped and tends to go into a board report as is. So if you can put into your board or your leadership team to say, right, this is what our clients think of us, the good, the bad, the ugly and everything else, it's brilliant, and it's saving firms so much time who's already using it. So again, really good for, again, consumer duties. It's about feeding information up and changing processes and everything else. Lastly, obviously, core to us is that ability to overlay it against the vulnerability data. Can you say to the regulator, well, yes, our vulnerable clients have the same levels of satisfaction around their outcomes as our non-vulnerable? That key premise that you need to be able to demonstrate. So all that was sort of in there. Okay, next slide, which I think is going to me straight to demo. Right, if you want to stop sharing, and then I will just need to share my screen. Okay.
That's what does modern technology again. Here we go.
Yeah, so I don't use, right, there we go. Share. And bring this up here. How are we doing for time? Right, we'll keep this short and sweet. So hopefully you can now see my shared screen, which should say dashboard on top of it.
We can indeed.
You can indeed. Wonderful. Oh, this is weird. I can't see it on my presentation screen. I'm not used to that. I'm used to Teams where it's got like big red squares around it.
Yeah.
So this is this is not me trying to pitch our product. I just want to give you a high level view of what we think good looks like from a survey point of view. So first is the easy way to issue a survey. So for us, again, we've seen flexibility is key for firms. So we have the ability to send it centrally, so you can upload a file. We can I don't know if it's mimicking your domain is the right word, but we can send it from your domain name. We can, they can be branded and all of that stuff, because this is your survey. So it's really important it comes across as your survey. The other interesting we found is when people are doing the vulnerability assessments and they have different clients in our system, they also wanted the ability to send it from here as well. So you can go into each individual client and you can send a survey as well. So real flexibility around that, I think, was key rule number one. The other one was say, keep it short, keep it easy. So we come up with our own survey questions. We have 8 of them. Plus we have a free form, free text field. Always try and include a free text field. Absolutely. That anecdotal information you get is gold dust. It really is. Because you're keeping the question numbers short and quite high level. Some of those nuances, or you don't want to miss anything. If someone has got a niggle, or be it good or bad, then that tends to be where they put it, is actually in that box. So let me show you an example of one of the outputs from the survey. So in this instance, we got Tom Smith, very imaginative. And what we've got, so we can then say, okay, across the 4 pillars, how did this person score? So good on support, perhaps not quite so good on value, good on suitability, and a high level of understanding. Again, it really gives you that granular detail. Here's the responses that we got. So these are just our questions, and each question can be tagged against consumer duty pillar. We've actually just brought in the ability to now add additional questions which are not attached to any pillar. So quite useful. I'm going back to this. What that then gives us, as I said at the beginning, the data is what is crucial. Sending a survey is not hard. Analysing it, using the data proactively from a compliance point of view, that's the tricky bit. So that's where, for our example, is a dashboard. We can see what's the overall satisfaction. We can see what's the breakdown between satisfaction from those who are vulnerable and those who are non-vulnerable. Going back to the original premise for the regulator, can you prove that your vulnerable clients get the same outcome or as happy with the outcome as your non-vulnerable? Again, that's demonstratable. Breakdown about pillars and absolutely everything else. The FLAD concept that we brought in as well is really, really, I love it, and it's actually gone down really, really well. So if a survey comes in where there is an area of concern, or it's a very strong score, then again, we have a flag section where it automatically comes into this section. For those of you who have multiple advisors as well, or look after multiple firms, there's a whole ton of filters we've built in as well. But I'll actually tell you here, okay, so Jonathan Bars is vulnerable, and then what are the reasons that it's actually been flagged? And then you can sort of go in and see the response and say, okay, felt rushed. If I had a plan in mind without seeing what I wanted, again, depending on where you are in your business, you can escalate it, you can update it, or you can flag it. So here we've got glow scores across the whole sort of gambit, essentially. So again, proactive, identify any issues straight away so you can nip them in the bud. Sentiment analysis that I talked about briefly as well, to show you an example of this. So again, you can cut this sentiment analysis down to an individual advisor across the whole firm, across a different office, and it will redo it all. And we'll look at, okay, overall, so what's positive, neutral, and negative. We have an AI generated summary. We don't hide behind to say, we up front, this is AI generated, and it's learning all the time. It's absolutely, it's generative AI, and it's really, really cool. We'll give you a theme analysis as well. So what themes are coming through? Again, this is all grouped together. Strengths and weaknesses, even though we now have to say areas for improvement. Sorry, I'm still a weaknesses person. And then customer voice, again, another area that the FCA absolutely really, really loves. And then say we now have a raw responses output, which is new. So that's sort of it. Again, this isn't a sales pitch, it's just showing what we think good looks like. So short and sweet, but using the data in a sensible and proactive fashion is absolutely crucial. I would really say don't put a survey in just because you feel you should do. Pointless, absolutely pointless. Put it in so you can use it, you can use the data, and it helps you and your business enhance and improve what you're doing and nip any potential issues in the bud really, really early doors. That's probably enough, to be honest, in terms of actually going through.
I was just going to dive in, guys, and just say I'm as regularly, I think the conversations I've had with firms over the years is there is sometimes a bit of an inherent fear. And your demo was brilliant there, but except for the fact that it showed that there was a very high level of negative.
So that's because
which is purely dummy data.
I really need to put some positives in there.
The honest truth is in my experience, firms that embrace and do this kind of process, it gets incredibly positive responses. Yeah.
We've seen that in our live data.
Yeah. And please don't be scared as firms about going out. The odd negative you get are the ones you want to get your hands on early so you can fix it. Yeah. So that you can retain the client and you can deal with it in a positive way. But don't expect, to get an awful lot of negative, because in my experience, it's 95% it's absolutely excellent and they love you. Yeah,
we're at 98% at the moment.
There we go. Yeah,
greens, and then there's a small number of ambers, if you like.
How are you finding completion rates as well? Because that's the other barrier I often find from advisors is they won't fill it in. My clients are not going to like it, and again, I tend to find that isn't the case. Do you often find that?
It is a bit the case. So one benefit I think we've seen, and we didn't even think about, because clients who use our platform would have already had a duty of care assessment or financial wellbeing assessment at the beginning of the journey. Yeah. And for that, we see 98, 99% completion rates. Because it's part of KYC, it's part of an actual, advice process. Because they've already had that and been through that, this is almost like a follow-up. Well, you've been through that. And so we do see higher. If you get 5 to 10% completion rates, you're doing well in a normal survey.
Yeah.
We're running at about 28. We're still very early days, by the way. So this is not robust enough data. But I think we're sort of, one firm's getting 28, one's getting about 40% responses, which they've never had anything like that before. Positioning is also absolutely key for this. Don't just send it out blindly. Let your client know. Go, we've now finished the process. I really hope you're happy with what we did. Normal thing to help us improve our service and to make sure we did everything right. You are going to get a survey. I would really, really, impress upon you the importance. If you could complete it, then that would be really, really helpful. Follow up if needs be. Don't be scared to follow it up. You've not just flogged them a fridge freezer from Curry's and asking them to give a 1 or 2 star.
Hopefully not, Jonathan.
Hopefully
not. Yeah.
Well, you might do. Depends how busy you are. You might have. Yeah. But do follow it up. Ask. This is an important part of your process, both from supporting your client, but also from a regulatory perspective. So don't just send and forget.
It's also worth saying, by the way, that in my experience, and it was a leading question because I wanted to make this point, you tend to find you get the very, very happy clients respond because they want to give positive feedback, which is brilliant. But you also, where somebody is unhappy and you've sent a survey, they are very likely to complete it. So it is likely, from my point of view, from the PI point of view, you are likely to tease out the ones who maybe aren't happy early through the survey. Yeah. The middle group that don't respond are probably the apathy group where it's lovely, thanks. Yeah. So the non-response in some ways is actually telling. Yeah. Yeah. So I don't worry too much about that, about the response rate. But it's where you get it, it tends to be, either largely incredibly positive, which is great because you can use that for, your in marketing to say how many satisfied customers you've got. Great thing to quote. I can't believe I'm a compliance person talking about the positive marketing. But,
do you find usually
Lee can't help himself now? Go on, mate. Yeah.
Do you find usually it's what people get from a survey as well, which is why they want to participate? Because sometimes. Yeah, how many times have you been on a call and they say, "Oh, after this call, you're going to get a text message with a survey, and could you rate me?" How many times you go to a restaurant and they put their a receipt down and go, "Oh, when you get back, could you give us a?" We don't do that, right? Because we get nothing from it.
But you do if you're really happy, or you're not, Lee.
Yeah, you do.
It's those two extremes of when you do it.
Yeah.
This is exactly. I mean, that's a brilliant example of exactly what I'm saying. Don't worry about that middle group not filling it in. It's exactly the same as that. Yeah,
it is.
It's also a very different experience and a different service because this is with an IFA. There's also a good relationship, a long-term relationship, and it's they've had this transactional this series of advice or review or whatever over a period of time. So again, this is where positioning comes in. This isn't just a tick box so you can give us 5 stars or whatever. This is a genuine feedback mechanism to help make sure that we are delivering the best possible service that we can.
Yeah.
So I think it's positioned like that. Not did you buy fridge fees?
It's the only way we improve, right? It's the very much
absolutely.
like I said at the very beginning of this call. At the end, when everybody leaves today's webinar, there'll be a feedback form that pops up. We want to hear about how the main presenter was. We want to hear if the content was relevant, to your needs. We want to hear about that because if it's not, then we need to adapt. And you're absolutely right. We've had the odd negative comment. But you're going to get
it today, of course.
You're never going to please everyone, right? You will never, ever please absolutely everybody. You'll always get that one negative comment, but that's what you adjust to as well. You look at it and how can we improve on, making it feel better for that one person? You naturally do.
Just jumping on Jonathan's point as well about the positive framing and getting the advisors to say, please do fill this in. We really value feedback. It's really useful. Again, going back to my point about the positive survey on file helping you defend a complaint, buy into encouraging clients to fill it in as much as possible. That you don't, if you, as much as I say that middle apathetic group in that isn't necessarily going to respond, there may be the odd one in there that might complain. So the more responses, and I know that's a negative way of looking at a survey, that it's one for our back pocket to use if they decide to vexatiously complain in the future. But, it is a very, very powerful piece of evidence to rely on should you need to in years to come. So, I totally agree with Jonathan. Getting advisors to frame it and encourage the feedback and making it clear that it's only going to take them a minute. And it comes back to, I agree with you, Jonathan, eight questions. I would say 8 to 10 question, absolute tops for me. Yeah. So that it takes them seconds to do. I don't know how many times you guys have started doing a post survey and it's, and after about 4 or 5 minutes, you're like, oh my dear God, how long is this going to take to fill in?
The success bar at the bottom is thinking, oh my
Lord.
It's shorter because it's dynamic.
And you drop off it. You stop doing it, don't you?
Yeah, you do.
Yeah. So it's got to be punchy. It's got to be short.
How do you overcome a multiple advisor firm? Ones that are really happy to do it and are bought into it, and some that just find it a pain in the backside or a nuisance or another part of the process and I haven't got time. And how do you overcome that?
Do it. So we've got firms, say early days. So as soon as building, we've got some who would let the advisors do it. Others, not a chance. We're doing this centrally.
Part of the back office, part of the
This
tying things
is
up.
part
Yeah.
of their compliance process. It's another part of the file checking.
Yeah.
Instead of just checking a file that an advisor has completed, get it from the horse's mouth. Go straight back to the client. So it's part and parcel. It's centralized, and that's why we created the function to be able to do a batch upload and centralize it all. Because you'll get a mixed bag.
Yeah, I think it comes back to that question that someone put. I can't remember. Apologies, but someone put they started to use it, or they're not using it anymore, and they've maybe dabbled in it, kind of thing. And it's just, is that because nobody owned the process? Nobody said, right, this is what we do, this is how we do it. At this point, it goes off, and this is who's owning that process. I think if you have loads of people being involved, owning or being involved in that process, some people might forget. Some people might think, I'll do it at the end of it. Some people might do it here. Where if you just go, look, this is the process, regardless, this is who's owning the process, then it's going to stay in place, right?
Yeah, I'd also dive in and say share the wins. Yeah, so if you don't get an advisor that buys into it, and some do, show the stats for the ones that do. Give them the ability to use it positively. As 98% of my clients think I'm absolutely the bee's knees, on marketing. You can't use that if you're not doing it.
Yeah.
So I think share the positive experience and the positive outcomes with the advisors who. I would again reiterate, most of the time, I think it's down to them having concern that what if I get a load of negative feedback? What if my clients don't like it? It's normally from not because they're deliberately avoiding it. It's normally maybe an underlying fear that can be overcome by showing how it works well with the users who do buy into it. Yeah.
You might even get I know my clients love me. Why would I need a survey to evidence that? But it's the way the questions are asked that is going to highlight and maybe get them thinking a little bit different. To this could be improved slightly. Yeah, you're amazing. You're amazing. I love what you do, but this part or that part or whatever it may be. So,
it's the nuances within the responses. Absolutely.
Of course it
and
is.
Going back to Jonathan's very early session on the regulatory backdrop, don't forget that part of the reason you're doing this is evidence that you can show. Yeah. And having rhetoric from an advisor saying, all my clients love me, why do I need it? That's not evidence.
That's not going to stack up.
It's about as far from evidence as you can.
I don't think that holds up, does it?
Not huge.
Damn it.
So information is power, as Jonathan very, very eloquently said at the beginning, much less clunkily than I just did there.
Absolutely. Well, we have hit the hour mark, gents. Thank you so much. I found it very insightful. Hopefully the audience did as well. 11 o'clock. It's been a great week. Hope you all have a wonderful weekend. Thank you for attending Club Live. Thank you for delivering some awesome content, guys. Bearrock and Commentis. John and Jonathan. Guys, thank you very much. Have a wonderful weekend. And unless there's any other questions, we'll bring today's session to an end. But no, it's been really good, guys. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.